The gaps are starting to appear a little bit in the audience, and be really nice for our last couple of speakers, certainly our next speaker, if you could just come forward a little bit, just like we did for Alexander. You did it for him, I'm sure you'll do it for me. So could those of you in the back half of the room just move yourselves forward a little bit, please. You don't have to sit next to anybody you don't like. You can leave a gap. But if you wouldn't mind, those people who are in the back half of the room, just move yourselves a few rows forward. That'd be really helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Just give you a couple of minutes to do that. You might meet somebody and get married or something like that. It could be great for you. There are things on the seats at the front as well. Okay. There are things on the seats at the front that you need as well. Don't make me come out there and drag you to the front, because I will. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a brand marketing and communications expert. He's affiliate chair of the International Special Events Society, EMEA region, and he began marketing events in 1989. He's senior lecturer in events at the University of Westminster. He has a PhD in cultural regeneration. He's a certified special events professional, and he's the managing director of Event Tech Lab, which is a partnership community for event tech startups. Please welcome James Morgan.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, welcome. So my session today is about the art of storytelling. And if you want to follow the slides on Glisser and you haven't downloaded the app, please put in that web link there and you can see everything on the Glisser application. So as a marketer, what I'm interested in is how do we get as many people engaged in our event before it starts so that we can sell tickets to that event. And this presentation is really some of my ideas on how we might do this. This is what I call the big social process. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hopefully you sell the tickets at the end of it. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look down that table and to see how each of these works so that you as event professionals can start selling more tickets to your events. As always, we start with the event concept. I don't know what kind of events you plan. It could be a conference, it might be a cultural festival, it could be a dinner for 20 people, but you don't know how many people are going to buy tickets to that event. So looking at this process, we start with what is your event concept, is understanding the details of that concept, your target audience, the type of event, as I've already discussed, the elements of the event. So for example, here we have a lovely AV setup, a stage, seating, conference hall. These are all parts of the event that we can use to create different stories about our event to engage the audience. And one of the other things, I'm okay, thank you. One of the other things that we also want to look at is what is special about your event, what is unique about that event. Because we don't want to just do something that everybody else has done before, because then it's not really attractive. As marketers, we talk about something called a USP, a unique selling point. And that's something else that you have to think about in the creative conceptualization process is, what is my selling point for the event? What is the point of difference that's going to set me aside from these types of events that I've done before? And as discussed earlier, who is your audience? if you don't understand who your audience is, you can't find the right stories or the right tone or language to appeal to that audience. So this is quite an important factor too. So looking at all these elements, we can move on to the next part of how this all works. And it's about creating stories. There's always going to be a big central story. This story that we're at now, the Eventex story, is about a congress for event professionals in Bulgaria, in Sofia. It's a very simple story, but how can we make that story more exciting and more engaging for the people that we want to buy tickets for that event? Well, hopefully I can answer that question for you, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. But let's start with understanding what you're selling or what you're telling a story about. So we all know that the core benefit of this Congress, for example, is education. Hopefully I can pass some of my knowledge to you so you can walk away with something that you didn't know before. That is the core benefit that we have. Then we go up a stage and we look at the actual product, the physical parts, the service-scape, the building, the chairs, the microphone. All the different elements that I discussed before are the physical attributes of that event. You need to understand these very well because they are part of the story that you want to tell to get people into the event. And the last thing that we have there is what we call augmentations or add-ons. Nice coffee, a taxi service, an after-event party, and little things that we can add to the core product and the physical landscape of the event that will make it more interesting, that can give it a point of differentiation, the USP that you want. So I might be sipping water because it's very hot in this room. So now we get to the point we understand what we're doing. We know the physical elements. We understand the benefits of the event we want to communicate to people, and we have some nice, flashy, interesting add-ons to our event. Now we want to start creating the stories around those different elements, around that concept. So as you can see, I've made it easy for you. I've got a table up there. So we have something that you can't touch, intangible. That is the core product, the education. You can hear it and see it, but you can't touch it, yeah? So there's a story about that, about the content or the different speakers. That can be done in many different ways. It can be based stories on entertainment, stories on the education. An email was sent out to you a couple of weeks ago with my biography on it. So you knew that that was a story that was generated with this event. It could be about a networking party as part of the event tonight, for example, an add-on. It could be something celebratory, last night's awards ceremony, celebrating the great work that event professionals around the world are doing. There's a story there too. And there could be a story about buying as well, because at the end of the day, we want to sell tickets to an event. So, in terms of the things we can't touch, and these emotions and moods or things that you receive into your head, we've got all those elements that we can create stories around. But what you have to take into account is, what is the best story for my audience about the education, about the celebration? or about those other elements that are in that box. So once you've figured that out with your team or by yourself, you can move down to the next area. Here we have the tables, the stages, as I explained, and we break it down into those elements again. And we look for different stories for the different audiences or audience that we have. So some people might be interested in a story about the venue. If you're organizing an event at a seaside resort, it might be a congress, there might be something to say about the destination as well, to attract people. We might want to talk about the decor. We might want to talk about this application that I'm using for the presentation, Glisser, because nobody's seen it before, so there's a story about that too. Food and drink, the type of people that are working at the event, these are all things that we can use to engage the people that we are sending this out to. And then again, we get to the add-on stage, where we're talking about intangible, and I have a spelling mistake, and tangible. So the destination, the image of the destination is an important story to tell. Nobody wants to go to an event in a destination that's not very interesting. If you're arranging an event in your hometown, you're going to pick a nice destination for that event. You're not going to ask people to go to an area that's not very pleasant, for example. You might want to tell people about who's sponsoring your event. That's very important in today's business climate. We all look for partners and sponsors so that we can add more elements to our events. And it all ends in storytelling, that whole column. We can use all of those things. You can add in yourself more things that you can tell stories about. These are just some basic ideas. But at the end of the day, it's all about, again, the audience. That point is repeated 3 times because that's the most important thing, is your market, the segment of the market, the niche, whatever that may be. So let's talk about the puzzle. You've got all these stories going around in your head, yeah? But how do you tell people about it? What do you tell people about? And in what way do you tell them about it? And that brings us on to number 3, which is the puzzle. We want all these stories that we're going to create to come together to give a central message about the whole event. So when we're creating the content, which we'll come on to, we've got to look for certain words, maybe particular colors that you use in your communication, certain expressions, a brand logo. These all help pull the ideas together. We've got the main story of the Eventex Congress that we're all at here, but within that, we've got the sub-stories that we talked about before. That is all part of the puzzle. So as an event professional, you've got to go through this creative process of how is that puzzle going to fit together. Must complement the main story. And very importantly, what social channels are you going to use? This is all about social selling. How do we use LinkedIn? How do we use Twitter? How do we use Facebook? How do we use all those different channels, even email blasts to do that? But importantly, once you've looked at your puzzle, at the same time, you've got to consider your social network. Some people might not like Facebook, they prefer LinkedIn or they prefer Zing. Some people might not use Twitter, they like Instagram. So we have to look at putting the puzzle together with the channels that would suit our social network that we're talking to. So that comes down to choosing the channels that you want to use. You understand your audience, you understand your event concept, and you have some stories that you want to tell. What is very important is to know your audience and the channels that they prefer, as well as how often they use these channels. I don't know how many people have Twitter accounts, but I know that the followers on my account and me as a person that follows them, I'm quite active on it. So that I know that if I send a message out, it's going to get some sort of traction from the people that I'm talking to or sending my message to. It's no good choosing a channel that doesn't have a very large audience or your audience isn't attracted to. And then what is the content? You know the audience, you know the channels, you know how often they use them, but what is the content that you're going to push out through these channels? And that brings us on to creating attention, interest, desire, and the action to buy that ticket. So, in terms of the attention, we've got some stories about the conference that we're at today. We've decided that we're going to use different parts of the event to tell those stories. We know the channels we're going to use. And content creation is a very creative process because obviously it's got to suit the audience, it's got to suit your event concept as well. If the concept of the event and the content are not aligned, then we're not going to have a successful social selling mechanism. So what I'd like you to do now is on your chairs, there's an envelope. Some people might have an envelope. Some people might have eaten their sweet already. And some people might have a party popper. Okay? You can open the envelope. Pop the party popper, please. If you've got a party popper, yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. Did you have an emotional response to that party popper? I saw lots of people smiling, didn't I? Yeah? So we're using our senses. We're using sound. We're using the feel of pulling the string. Yeah? We're using different senses to create an emotion. Okay? So if you open the envelope, whoever has an envelope, have a smell. What's inside there? Do you like the smell? Is that an emotional response? Like something? Yeah? Now, how do we turn that smell into online content? Yeah? How do we turn the noise of the party popper into online content? How do we turn the taste of the sweet into online content? You are the creatives, yeah? You create events, you've created the concept, you've understood your audience, you've created the elements of the event. This is the next stage, to use the 5 senses that people have when they get into their office and then they open their Instagram, or they open their Twitter account, or their LinkedIn. You want to have these kind of reactions going on, okay? So it's about the content part that is really important. So the content has to have certain elements to it. The text, the language you use, the tone of the language. Do you tell a joke to make people smile? Do you use formal language because it's a very formal conference? This isn't a formal conference. This is more about event professionals getting together, exchanging knowledge. And we can have some very interesting interactions. I'm sure some of you have swapped ideas already, talked about different things. So it's less formal. But some events can be very formal. If you're organizing a government conference on sustainability, it could be very formal. But what we want to do is to get the attention, the interest, and the desire to get people to buy tickets, the action. We want this emotional reaction. I'll come back onto the timing of the content in a minute. Okay, here you see some emotional reactions like you just had in the room. Okay? Confused because he didn't understand the message. Happy, very happy, sad, bored. People will have different reactions. You all will. When you receive emails, when you receive tweets, LinkedIn, or you look at your Twitter wall and you go, that's boring, I'll just go through that. Facebook, oh, that's not very interesting, I carry on down. So what we're trying to do as event professionals is to get an emotional attachment to create the desire, to create the action to buy that seat at that event. This is where timing becomes very important. So one of the elements to the event that I might plan is that at lunchtime we have a fantastic chef, who's going to serve a 3-course meal to all the people that are attending the event. Do we send the menu out? Yes or no? I would go and see that chef 2 months before the event and would say, I want you to cook me the whole menu. I'd get a photographer there and I would take photographs of the first course, the second course, and the dessert. And I would start to tell the story about one element of that event. This is what you will be tasting from the chef at whatever the name of the hotel is, with a lovely photograph. And when do I send it? I send it out at 12:30 before lunchtime. So there I've got emotional reactions happening already. I've got created a desire for food, because it's nearly lunchtime. But I'm making a mental connection to the event. So I've told the story, a very simple story about the food. It could say, these are the ingredients, you can make it at home. And that's something you might quite like. So that's one example. Then what about smell? Smell is something that's very interesting because we can't see smell. We can't taste smell. It's just something in the air. We can tell a story about the florist at the event, can't we? We've got this fantastic florist. The flowers come from this beautiful place in the mountains somewhere, and you have a very visual photograph of flowers on your website or on your Facebook feed or on your Instagram of the flowers, or the florist holding the flowers, and tell a little bit of story about the florist and the events he's done. There we're creating, through visual means, the smell of the flowers. You can do that with, well, we talked about taste, we talked about smell. We see everything anyway. The brain, in this kind of situation, engages the senses in different ways, and 75% of our brain is to do with what we see, looking there, at me, around the room. Then about 20% is on the sound, and then the rest is smell, touch, etc. Yeah? So your brain works in very different ways, but what we want to try and do is tell stories that are going to create these emotive reactions in people. So everybody was smiling when the poppers went off. How do we do that when we're creating the content for social media? I'm here to give you a couple of ideas, but it's up to you as event professionals to come up with the big ideas. Those ideas are going to win you awards. Yeah? It's very, very difficult, or it's very, very easy. Some people are good at it, some people aren't. So then that means you're starting to look at your creative process within your team. Who are the creative people? It might be the girl sitting on the reception desk who dresses very well, and she's always going to art exhibitions, and you're an AV and lighting company. And she might be a good person. She's not a technician, but she might have some very good ideas on how this can all work. So gathering teams up, creative teams, you can have an accountant sitting on a creative team. And he'll say, yes, we could do that, but it's going to cost too much money, so we won't. Or he might even come up with an idea about how do we tell the story of the destination? And he could come up with some ideas about that. So anybody can be creative. You've just got to put them into the right environment. Into an environment where they don't feel threatened. And one of my expressions that I have is when I'm talking to creative teams or students that are doing some coursework on creativity, I say to them, there is never a bad idea. A bad idea can become a good idea once people talk about it. So if we go back to this man here in the slide, we really want that one there where he's smiling. We want the one in the middle as well, and that one there. That's what your job is as an event professional, is to try and create these emotions through your online storytelling. What are the stories going to be? How can I use the story of the screens to create an emotion? That's a difficult job. One of my clients used the story of the screen. They had a curved screen like this at the conference, and they said, well, why don't we make the screen 90 meters long and blend all the video into the screen? There was a story about that. And people thought, wow, I want to see that. So they bought tickets. So you can create stories out of something that is not very interesting. This podium here looks pretty boring, doesn't it? Yeah? Is there a story there? Could be made by a craftsman, or the leather might come from a specific place that does sustainable farming. You need to look below the surface of the elements of the event. Look at the source of those elements and see how you can create stories out of those and then turn them into an emotional online experience. Very important as well. We talk about influencers and ambassadors. These are people that you know, or you might have only ever met them online, and they have a lot of followers. They have a lot of likes on their Facebook page. These people are very good for your event if they like what you're doing. These are the people you need to recruit for your sales. These are the people that are going to amplify your message by retweeting and sharing, as well as talking to people in a room like this and saying, I'm going to this event next week. Why don't you come along? So not only do you have creative content going through the right channels, you also want to use people that you think can influence the effectiveness of that content to create the attention, create the interest and the desire for the action. And then that brings us on to the next point. We have to have within the content a link back mechanism. Now, is that going to be creative, or is it just going to be a link? Is it going to be a photograph that you go onto? Is it going to be what we call gamification? You play a game to get to the next point. Is it 2 questions, and if you answer yes, yes, and they're both correct, you go to the next stage, which comes back to your sales stage. It might even give them a discount because they got both questions right. If it says no, you don't get back to that stage. It just goes to the normal price. So there's lots of different things you can do to link back to the sales page. So this is obviously where we're going to sell the tickets, is in the link back area. We've told some very interesting stories about the different elements of the event, and we've had some emotions from people which engages them. They share it. More people are engaged by those stories. So we have more people linking back to our sales page or our sales number or whatever you want to use. If it's online, it's obviously better to use an online sales page. So we want the action. But that action has got to be quite easy. The link back can be fun and create an emotion, but the actual action to purchase must be a very simple process. Which is buy tickets. Yeah? So, how many times have you gone to buy a ticket for something and there's a bug on the website, or there's some sort of complication with the registration process, or it asks you for too much information, because you only want to stay on that page for maybe 10, 20, 30 seconds. You don't want to be there for 5 minutes. You want something that's going to be quick and easy. So these are my suggestions. It's got to be convenient. So if you look at a platform like Weems, who are exhibiting downstairs, you will see that they have multi-currency payment systems. PayPal, multi-currency payment systems. Some of the older event registration software have big problems with these because they were built a long time ago for specific locations. And they didn't think that we would live in a global world one day. As event organizers, you want to understand your audience. We talked about that right at the beginning. Okay? Do we want to understand every single person in the audience, or do we just want to understand the profile of the audience, the generalized things about that audience, the basic age, the likes, the dislikes? How do we get that data? Do we look at old events? Do we look at new events? Do we look at research on millennials, on people that are retired? Where do we get that kind of data from? Well, what you don't want to do is you don't want to start asking people for that data when they are registering. One industry that's very bad at asking for too much data is the exhibition industry. You go to register for an exhibition, it wants to know your birth date, the town you were born, what level you are, how much you spend, all sorts of data, yeah? And by the end of it, you can sometimes get halfway through and go, well, do I really want to go to this event? Because it's just too much. You have so many other things to do. You are busy event professionals. You just want to go through that registration, buying the ticket, going to the event. Because all the good that you've done, creating those emotional reactions with your content, you can destroy them in those last seconds by asking them for too much stuff. So keep the data collection as simple as possible. Something else that you can use is quite often when you've signed up, you get a ticket sent to you, and it looks like a barcode entry for one person. That's all it says. Why isn't there a story there? Why shouldn't you use some sort of content on that ticket to keep that emotional interest going, so that when they get to the event, they get their phone out. I've got my e-ticket here. I'm going to that later. Oh, that was so good. The taste thing that they sent to me. And already you've engaged your audience before they walk through the door through one simple thing, is having something on the ticket. Tickets are often, well, 99% of the time, tickets are very sort of dry, boring, transactional receipts that don't really tell a story. We can tell a story about the ticket on the ticket, or we can tell a story about the education, or a reminder about something, or a photograph of the food for lunch. Lots of different things can be pulled together to entice you, to excite you as you walk through the door. And obviously this at the bottom here, we talk about terms and conditions, refunds, cancellation policies. All those things must be very clear. It's kind of European legal legislation that we need to do that as event professionals. Quite a few companies I've seen don't really take a lot of care in this kind of area, so it can be quite problematic if something does go wrong for you as the organizer. So here we have a very simple process, and just want to go back to it. Of how it all works. We've got our idea, we create our stories, we look for the right channels for the audience that we are appealing to. We then create the content and send it out to those channels. We provide the link back mechanism, and hopefully you will sell some more tickets. Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Any questions? No? Well, you're a very easygoing audience. Yes. There's
Hello, my name is Sylvia.
Hi, Sylvia.
And I'm a marketing manager of a software company. So the events that we are organizing are mostly kind of, let's say, seminars to show our products, which are B2B software products. So it doesn't really sound very exciting, right? So our events usually are free to attend. And we've noticed that when you buy a ticket, you're most likely to go to the event. But when you don't buy a ticket and the event is for free, you can decide whether to go or not at the last very moment. So what can we do about engaging people better and to make them decide to go to our event and not to decide it at the last very possible moment?
It's very common amongst tech companies to do familiarization events for people free of charge. And normally the events are free, and normally they will get a dropout rate on the registration of over 50 to 60%. Is that your experience? Yeah. So I work with a company called Three Beards in London, and they were doing events for startups. And there was a lot of interest in the beginning 3 years ago in all the whole startup sector in London. And these people found that their events were full. But as more people started offering these kinds of events, these free events, the attendance started going down, but the registrations stayed the same. So people, what they were doing is they were registering for 3 or 4 events on the same night, and then they would go to their friends, or which one are you going to go to? Yeah? And then they would go, oh, let's go to that one, and then they wouldn't go to the other ones. That's what was happening. And what they did is they decided that they were going to charge a small amount of money to get when people registered. And it was in UK £5, so 12, 15 levs or something like that. I'm not sure of the rate. For the first 2 events, it went right down the registration. But then all of a sudden it started to come back up again. And they're still charging for their events, only a small amount of money, but once people have made that decision to buy the ticket, they go. It can be these are more sort of public events for lots of startups, and obviously for your company that's just trying to show one particular product is quite difficult, because you have literally the venue, the destination, the AV system that presents the software, some computers, and the software is the product. So what you need to do is you need to introduce some small, clever elements that aren't going to have a big effect on your budget, that are going to kind of draw people in. And at the same time, if you don't want to charge, you do need some add-ons. So we looked at the thing right in the beginning. You've got your core benefit, which is your software. You've got your actual product. The core benefit is them to learn. You've got the actual product, which is the software, and the venue, the tangible stuff. But then you need some stuff on top of that. You need some add-ons. Yeah? Does that answer your question? It might even be beer and pizza afterwards. I don't know if you give them food or anything. Yeah? Well, send out photographs of the food. Yeah? This is what you're getting afterwards. Simple. Yeah? Okay. Any other questions? This is easy.
James, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, James Morgan. Thank you in particular, James, to get us back on time. We are now precisely on time, just where I wanted to be. Professional MC, you see, professional MC. So now we have our final coffee break, and then at the end of the coffee break, 2 things you do not want to miss. One is the prize draw. Something quite I'm not sure what the prize is, but it's fantastic. So you need to be here for that. And then we've got our final speaker, who's one of my best friends, who's going to give you a tremendous performance that you're really going to enjoy. So you need to be back here in your seats at 5:15. I will see you then. Enjoy your coffee.